You're pushing us to the limit. And what do I mean by that? You're asking us to talk about history, the history of the South. This is in Georgia. What happened in Georgia? There were savages in Georgia. It was the ancestors of the white right-wingers. They were absolute savages. They murdered people. They lynched people. They raped people. They enslaved people. They took babies from their mothers and sold them as property. You want to talk about savages? Your ancestors were the biggest savages the world has ever seen. So don't you dare call a black man a savage after you murdered him. Don't you dare do that. I'm so sick of African Americans being called violent when the world's worst violence was done to them, not by them, to them, not by them. For God's sake, you want to do racist stereotypes? If it fit anywhere, and it doesn't, but if it fit anywhere, it would certainly fit white right-wingers in the South, who has hundreds of years of history of being savages.
You have African-American rappers saying N-word this and N-word that, but a Caucasian can't. So say it. Say what? Say the word you want to say. I'm not saying that I want to say it, I'm just saying that I can't. So you can. Say it. Say it right now. I will say it with you. Oh, this is hypocritical. You know we can't say it. All right, I think we can move.
Black people weren't allowed on Epstein's island, yay! Except they would eat us and extract our melanin for riches and experiment on us and torture us and rape our children and our mothers and our men. Yeah, and then poison our communities and our media and our education and our music just to rebrand slavery so no one asks questions, because this isn't slavery. It's just a glamorized version of it. And then they sit back and watch and laugh as they give everyone the scraps in the shortest month of the year to celebrate our history that they rewrote and they ruined and they poisoned. Yeah. And then they just laugh as their indoctrination passes from generation to generation. What are people going to do about it? We're not angry enough, but happy Black History Month, you guys. Happy Black History Month.
I remember when woke used to mean like a black person that was tapped in.
Until they stole it. Same as all those white thugs robbed rock, hip-hop, R&B, gold, silver, diamonds, chains, braids, fades, AVE, the invention of the traffic signal, light bulb, and refrigeration, the happiness of thousands of kids on the Middle East getting bombed, black people's dignities, the concept of black fatigue, Hawaii, Puerto Rico, Mexico, South America, and the indigenous people's lands, and the whole continent of Africa. And I could go on, but I think y'all get the point.
I am white, and I was born into a white family with a racist white father who hated black people and used the N-word in his everyday vocabulary. My oldest brother, who ended up sexually assaulting me when I was 17 years old, his username on his laptop or his password to his laptop used to be DTAF, which was death to all, FAGS. Every single person in my family supports Trump actively and loudly. And even after being through all that, I am still smart enough and have my own head on my shoulders and can use my brain and do my own research to determine that all of those things are bad. I was raised to believe they weren't, and as I grew up, I realized that they in fact are. It doesn't matter what your family thinks or believes or who you come from, the world of opportunity at your hands.
What I hate about the whole whitewashing history, when they say, well, we shouldn't make little white kids feel bad. What the fuck? It's history. Why can't white kids learn about slavery, Native American genocide? I mean, why can't we teach that? Why is that bad? It's part of history.
There's this whole thing that is a part of the white experience. And it is that when something makes a white person feel uncomfortable, right, everybody shushes it up.
Right.
It's like, shh, no, let's not talk about that. And then when we talk about slavery, it's like, shh, no, that makes us uncomfortable.
I want to talk about slavery. I'm talking about American slavery of black people. For 400 years, by the way, it was 400 years. And you're probably thinking, I already know all about this. We talk about this in school. I don't need to learn anymore. Well, let me tell you, we actually don't talk about this in school. We don't talk about the truth of it. So let me tell you some things that I learned while researching this. And it's not that hard to research. You just have to look it up. So fact check me if you want, but here we go. First one I wrote down, you probably heard the term mother. Okay, and I'm not going to do any of that corny, like, grape stuff. I'm going to use the real words because those people deserve it. They deserve to not be graped or whatever the So, slave owners sometimes would force, this was a common occurrence, would force black men to rape their own mothers publicly, to publicly humiliate them and break their spirit. That's where the term comes from. The term comes from slavery and rape. I'm never going to use that term again. Once I found that out, I was so sick. Next up, the Atlantic slave trade, which we've all heard about, right? If you have like a public education, hopefully you've heard about this. It was so much worse than we could ever possibly imagine. And like, I mean that. Certain ships were actually invented to make it faster so that the slave traders could get more of a profit because people were dying too quickly on the ships. They had special made masts that were much higher. They were the fastest and biggest ships so that they could make a higher profit because people kept killing themselves and dying. And now let me add on to that, people committing suicide because the conditions were so horrible on the ship. They hadn't even made it to slavery yet. They hadn't made it to the plantations, and they were still killing themselves because they knew how bad it was going to be. Sharks literally changed their migration patterns because bodies were just thrown overboard once they died. However, the Atlantic slave trade officially ended in 1808, right? That was the law that was put in by the early United States government. But do you think that stopped it? No. Let me talk about the reverse Underground Railroad. A lot of Southerners went up north, and they had these like gangs that would go and capture, they would kidnap black people. Even if they had never been a slave in their life, if they were escaped, no matter who they were, if you were black, they were going to try to kidnap you. They sold children, especially children, because they were easier to kidnap. It was just a big human trafficking thing. And it boggles my mind that we aren't like, we don't really talk about this stuff in school, at least not at my school in Utah. And also to counteract the end of the slave trade in 1808, you know what they did? They made breeding farms. And you can guess what that is. It was a rape farm. Girls as young as 13, you know, I wouldn't be that shocked if it was younger, but at least girls and women as young as 13 were sent to special plantations that were exclusively made for breeding, making new people to enslave. And I also didn't know about this, and I don't know, I'm just fuming right now because like I knew it was bad, but like doing like a little bit of your own research makes you realize how horrible it was. Like so much worse than I ever imagined. Another one, you may have heard about this, but if you haven't, let me tell you, the white people, the slave owners, would use African American hair for cushions, for couches, for insulation. They pulled people's teeth that had pretty nice teeth, whatever. They would pull them and turn them into dentures and sell them to rich white people. And you know who had those dentures? George Washington. He had teeth pulled from his slaves to make his own dentures. No, his teeth were not wooden. That's a myth. His teeth were made from slaves' teeth. I mean, they turned their skin into leather. Another thing, they used these people as much as they could. It's horrifying. Obviously, they exploited them for labor. That's the one we all know. But they also used women in particular for fucking medical experimentation. Do you want to know the reason we know so much about women's gynecology? Is because of the human experimentation that happened to black women in the 1800s and before. Also, the sheer amount of that women had to endure from their masters or whatever, don't get me started, but the amount of rape that happened within, not just on plantations, but like during the slave trade, during auctions, it's just so disgusting. I saw a study that said that 16% of all African Americans can trace their ancestry back to Europe. That is because of rape. 16% of all African Americans today. And this video is 5 minutes long. I've been talking for a minute. I haven't even scratched the surface on the cannibalism. It makes me so angry. And guess what? It didn't end with the Emancipation Proclamation. That was a great start, but it didn't end. You really think those people that owned other people were just like, oh, well, it's illegal now. I guess I have to let you all go. No, that didn't happen. They kept their slaves. They weren't all just suddenly freed because the president told them they had to. Really, guys? And even the slaves that were freed, guess what? They underwent so much horrific stuff for the rest of their lives. The rest of their lives. People don't realize how common and how brutal and how horrific and depraved lynchings were. Like, it's so insane to me. Like, when people are like, why shouldn't I feel bad about this? I didn't own a slave. Well, Well, look at your family history, guys. I looked at my family history. I had, because I'm really into family history, I had like my 5th great grandpa or something was from Kentucky, and his will says, to my son, I leave an African American girl, well, I think he said Negro, I don't want to say that word though, named Luda. And it just made me feel so disgusted at my own heritage. Like, the fact that people don't feel shame at all. The people are like, oh, well, whatever, like, it's in the past. That bothers me so bad. And guess what? It isn't that far in the past. It's not that far in the past. The first black girl to go to an all-white school, she's younger than Trump. She has Instagram and TikTok. I don't know. I'm sorry I'm so heated. I probably just sound so stupid, but I'm just so disgusted right now. Just like thinking about it, and like I've written some stuff down. Just like, it just makes me so angry. It didn't end in 1863. It didn't end in 1865. You, like, please, I want you to do your own research. I want you to find out as much as you can about this to understand how horrible it was, because we truly have no idea. Anyways, rant over. I hope I didn't word anything poorly, because I'm not thinking right now. I'm just kind of disgusted right now. So I hope that this wasn't too, like, sensitive. But yeah, that's it, guys.
Let me say that again. The whole history of America is the history of rich white men telling not rich white people that their enemies are black and brown. It starts in the colonies of what would become the United States. Let's remember, during the colonial period, mid-1600s, there was no such thing as white people. I know some people who are now called white find that shocking, right? Because they think whiteness is real, right? But whiteness was created. Europeans didn't call themselves white. We didn't call ourselves white. We weren't all members of one big happy family. Are you kidding? Have you studied the history of Europe? The history of Europe was about killing each other. That's what we did in Europe. We just killed each other before we figured out there were other people to kill. We just killed each other, right? I mean, that was the history of Europe. The English hated the Irish, right? Northern Italians didn't even think that Southern Italians were Italians. The Germans hated everybody, and everybody hated their ass right back, right? There was no team called white, no race called white, but all of a sudden, in the middle of the 1600s, there was. Why? Why was it suddenly necessary to create this thing called the white race? Well, because rich people can count. That's why. And so rich folks looked around, the ones that owned all the land, in the colonies, the colonial elite looked around and they realized something, that they were heavily outnumbered by African enslaved folks, by European indentured servants who were just one level above a slave, or other Europeans who weren't technically indentured servants, but they were still peasants, didn't have any money, didn't have any land, and they could do the math. They added it up and they were like, damn, we got to figure out a way to split these folks apart from one another or they're going to rise up and take our stuff, right? Because after a while, these black folks who were enslaved Africans and these quote unquote white folks who were poor Europeans are going to figure out they're all getting played by these rich people. Right? So ultimately, the rich figure out they've got to come up with some way to get somebody in that group on their team. The easiest thing is to get the poor Europeans, right? Because at least they look like you. They sort of share some of the customs and the culture. So they all of a sudden create this thing called whiteness, and they say, now you're part of the club. Now we're going to let you testify in court, enter into contracts, vote, at least if you're a man, own a little bit of land, at least if you're a man, right? And we're going to get rid of indentured servitude. No more of that, because you're too good for that. And we're going to take the white men, now called white men, and put them on the slave patrol to keep black people in line. Give them a horse and a gun and a badge and make them feel big and powerful, right? They're still poor. They still don't have anything. They didn't pay the slave patrol well, right? Just exploited them, used them as a buffer between the elite and the other poor folks, particularly poor folks of color. And pretty soon the rebellions that occasionally happened where black and white got together to overthrow the elite, those stopped because the divide and conquer had begun to work, right? You could turn people against each other by telling those poor white folks, they got to keep these black people in line. And so that divide and conquer gets initiated in the colonies. Rich white men telling not rich white people that their enemies are black and brown. Fast forward to the Civil War era. And you have, I'm from the South, right? My people, the elite in my part of the country, right, actually announced that the reason they wanted to break away from the Union and possibly go to war with their brothers and sisters to the North was in order to maintain slavery and white supremacy. They said that at the time. We lie about it now. And we say it had nothing to do with that. But of course, at the time, they didn't have any shame about it, so they just said it openly. Right? The vice president of the Confederacy, Alexander Stephens, said that the cornerstone of the new government was the great truth that the Negro was not the equal of the white man. So that's the reason the Confederacy was formed and existed. But here's the trick. If I'm rich and I want to go to war to protect my ownership in other human beings, my property, but you're poor and you don't own any enslaved people, why the hell would you go fight to protect my stuff? Because I'm a rich person. I'm not going to fight. Rich people don't go to war. right? Rich people get poor people to go to war for them, whether it's in 1860 or whether it's during the 1960s or whether it's today, right? Rich folks get doctors to write notes for them that say that they have heel spurs and that's why they can't go to Vietnam. And if you don't know who I'm talking about, you can Google that shit because he's sitting in the White House right now, right? Well, I can't go fight. I have heel spurs. Send some poor kids to do that for me, please, right? So that's been a long-standing tradition. So the rich have to figure out a way to convince the poor to go fight for them. But that's a hard thing. That's like a hard sell, right? Like, how the hell, why would you do that? Why would you go fight to protect my property rights when you don't own anything? The only way you would do it is if that rich person comes to you and says, hey, listen, you gotta go fight because we gotta maintain our way of life because if these people get free, they're gonna take your jobs. No, fool, they already got your job. That's how it works, right? Because if I'm white and I gotta charge you $1 a day to work on the farm, but you can get a black person to do it for nothing because you own them, guess who got the job? Free got the job, right? So in a sense, poor white folks would have been better off joining with black folks to overthrow the slave system. That would have raised the wage floor of all working people. But they got tricked by rich white men telling them that their enemies were black and brown. Fast forward to the 1930s. And you have white labor leaders. They're not even the elite, right? The labor leaders are not the elite, but they're the elite within the labor movement. And even they had fallen for it at this point. So they didn't want to integrate their unions. And they would say things like, well, we can't have black people and Mexicans and Chinese folks in our unions because if we do that, it's going to reduce the professionalism of our craft. We have to maintain the integrity of our profession. No, fool, you need more people in the damn union is what you need. And if you don't let those folks in, guess what happens when you go out on strike? Who is the boss going to use to replace you? They're going to replace you with the very same black and brown folks that you didn't want to work next to, right? And so at the end of the day, and then you're going to blame them for taking your job rather than the white rich dude for giving it to them, right? Divide and conquer, telling not rich white folks that their enemies are black and brown. And now we fast forward to the president. We got the president of the United States becoming president on the basis of that same rhetoric, telling not rich white folks that the reason they don't have a job is because Mexicans took them, right? That's the argument. Keep in mind, there's been a net outflow of Mexican folks from this country, out of this country in the last 10 years. Right now, border crossings and actual in-migration at the lowest level they've been since the 1970s. So anybody who believes that is a damn fool or somebody who does not understand how to do research on the internet or someone who doesn't care, right? But he says the reason you don't have a job is those brown folks took them.
When you look at this side-by-side comparison throughout the bill, it reads like a how-to guide in historical whitewashing. Are you aware that this new version of the bill from the Senate removes the writings of Frederick Douglass?
I am.
Are you aware that this new version of the bill from the Senate removes the writings of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.?
Yes.
Are you aware that this new version of the bill from the Senate removes the history of Native Americans?
The way the bill is laid out,
that's a yes or no question.
Because we were very clear that we could not be conclusive about every single document out there that we could.
Americans.
I'm going to give you an answer. This isn't a trial. I'm going to give you an answer.
Okay, I'm ready for the answer.
The way it's set out is so that a teacher can go to different documents in different authors by which to teach from. It's by no means meant to be a conclusive list.
Let me just ask you one more time. Are you aware that this new version of the bill from the Senate removes the history of Native Americans? It's on page 3 of the side-by-side if you don't have it in front of you.
Then I believe you.
Okay. Are you aware that this new version of the bill removes mentions of Cesar Chavez?
Yes.
Are you aware that this new version of the bill removes mentions of Susan B. Anthony?
Yes, I am.
Yet the new version of the bill from the Senate, this is not the bill we all passed as a House, but the Senate's version, it still includes the writings of Alexis de Tocqueville, and he's not even an American. Could that be because he's a white man?
History is teaching white Americans how white slave owners raped, beat, humiliated, mutilated, murdered, and cannibalized their slaves. Accurate history is teaching that George Washington's false teeth were made out of his slaves' teeth. Accurate history is teaching that Abraham Lincoln may have said some words and signed some shit, but he did not physically do anything to free the slaves. The white abolitionists also often get almost total total credit for freeing the slaves. I bet you've never even asked yourself what the slaves were doing to free themselves, and the answer to that is most of the fucking work, including giving the ultimatum of war. But then we get a bunch of white people mad that their kids might feel guilty if we teach real history. It's not about your white child's feelings. Teaching accurate history isn't about white people's feelings. But that does sound like something that someone who's only ever been taught a white glorifying version of history would counter with. Ask why we ever felt like we needed to curate a false version of what white people did and did not do to black people to begin with. And then ask yourself why white ass politicians are verbally attacking real history by calling it slurs, which is by default also the act of calling black people slurs.
My kid just asked why there's no White History Month. Good question. I'm glad you asked. Well, if you think about it, most of what we learn about history comes from a white perspective. When this country was founded, white people put themselves in charge. So who do you think was writing the history books and deciding what was important enough to remember? Yeah, white people. Of course, there were other people doing things and creating history during those times, but people of color were enslaved, denied rights, and intentionally shut down. Their stories just weren't listened to. So still today, every American learns about the founding fathers and other white leaders. We hear about brave white folks discovering the frontier, even though there were already people here. And a lot of the things around us, like roads and buildings and awards, are named for white people. Black History Month is special because it reminds us to keep learning more about history from perspectives we don't already hear and see every single day. The struggles and achievements of Black people are a huge part of our country's story, and we need to see the whole picture to understand our whole history.
So guys, today I get to really talk about my white people in the audience on this channel. And I believe that most of the people that follow me and they are white on my channel are people that are trying to learn, to unlearn, and to relearn things that, you have information that you were given growing up in school, by the adults that were in your life at the time. And you grow up to realize that most of these things were just stereotypes of things that are not actually true, but you would not know if they weren't true unless you did some research, unless you are old enough to realize that that is not how life works. Now, I keep reminding you guys that I am fully aware that there are white people that are not racist, yeah? And if they are, it's those small things that they're unable to even determine, or they're unable to pick when they're doing them. For example, there are some reactions, there are some things that you'd think in your mind and you think to you it's pretty much like normal, but it's internalized racism. And if there is a black person next to you, they might get to pick that and think of you as a racist person. But for you, maybe you did not even realize that it was wrong what you did or said. And yeah, pretty much that. Now, I am well aware that I have that kind of people in my audience, and I'm so happy, guys, to have you over here. Let's keep learning together. Let's keep sharing. Let's keep changing, change begins here, and change begins today once we do lots and lots of these kinds of talks and discussions. Of course, it's not going to be in vain. It's going to change a few things, perspectives here and there. And by the end of the time, things will have been, they will take a different turn, which I believe will mostly be good, yeah, for the good of black people, for the good of white people, for the good of society as a whole. So yeah, that's really the main aim of this channel. And today we are focusing on such people. I know there are white people that have grown in homes and in places where racism was the order of the day and it was nothing to feel ashamed of. It was actually thought to be the right thing to do, You should not like black people because no good reason, but yeah, you should just not associate yourself with them. You should not be anywhere close to them. You should not have hangouts with them because they are black, and that's all the reason that you're given. And yeah, there are also other stereotypes. For example, talking about black people are very violent. Every single time you'll find black people being violent, you know. They speak of it as though there are no white people in jails because of violence, as if there are no cases that we have witnessed of white people treating other people in a way that is physically abusive and such. Yeah, so those kind of stereotypes, you know, they make kids grow up thinking that it's actually true, and there is a big influence sometimes when it's your parent or the adults in your life that you trust, and most children actually trust you as an adult in the room, and anything that you tell them, they are bound to think it's the truth, and they will live by that, and they will actually become just like you because they trust you with everything that they have. So anything that you say, anything that you do to them, that is the right thing to do. And growing up, that is exactly what they will be doing. That is exactly how they'll be treating people. When they see you treating, for example, a waitress in a hotel, and you're treating them with disrespect, they think and they pick that and think that is the right thing to do. Now, it's the same case for white people and the families that they have been raised in. There are families where these children have grown to hate black people for no apparent reason, simply because the adults that have raised them did not like black people for whatever reason. Sometimes there's not even a reason. It's simply because why aren't they the same color as ours? Yeah, their color is wrong, so we do not want to associate with them. It's sometimes as simple and plain as that. And these kids grow up to, most of them will not grow up to question that. Most of them, you know, even you, as you watch this video, there are some things that your parents or the people that raised you, the things that they used to do, some of them you actually just do them right now, and you do not get to question why do we have to do it this way and not the other way. Yeah, it's because of the trust that I'm talking about. You trust that they cannot have taught you the wrong thing. Now, it's the same for white people. They have grown in families where sometimes the parents are very racist. They hate black people for no good reason, and they plant that hate in their children. Children grow up in such environments, and they also just have that innate hate for black people, and they will behave as such. Yeah, they go to schools, there's teachers harassing black kids, you know, sometimes even the schools do not admit black kids, and all those things start to make a lot of sense. And mind you, it's the bigger percentage of white people are the ones that are racist. Yeah, so that means in a whole community or a place that white people live, you will find one or two homes that are not racist, and that's not good news because all the others are racist. So it's easy for a child to pick that racism and carry it on because all their neighbors' kids, they're speaking the same language, and that becomes their reality, that becomes their truth. And now growing up, most of them will not actually question, they will not believe anything else that they are told. They will be surprised sometimes to find out that everything they were told was actually a lie. Now, for very few people that are usually very, what I would call smart and intelligent or something of that sort, some of them are born researchers. Some people are just born curious. They want to know, they want to find information, they want to dig in, they want to do everything possible to get the right information. Now, those kind of white kids are, for example, the ones that you've seen on this channel, on this video. They do not simply take your word for it. They listen to you well, carefully, you know, and when they get to a point where they can actually find those facts for themselves, they actually do the work. They do their own research, they interact with black people. If you told them black people are violent, they will interact with black people to confirm that they're actually violent. Turns out most of the times that everything they were told is not the reality of things. Black people are humans like everyone else. They get annoyed when they are provoked, they get, they have emotions, they're human beings. So once they interact with Black people and realize that they're just as human as the white people, and there's really nothing different about them except the color of their skin, which is not a big deal. And now that is how you get people that have a mind shift. They do not just believe everything that their adults say because they know that they could lie. They could also be speaking the way they are because they were taught that by their parents, and they did not do the work of researching to make sure that whatever information they have is actually true. Yeah. So, yeah, thankful to such people that have made it a point to always find and seek information and try to verify these things, because it is very unfair of people to just look at a certain group of people and name them all sorts of names, and then you find out later that it's actually not even true. You have tarnished their names. Black people's names have been tarnished. There's a lot of vices that are related and associated with Black people, but when you interact with Black people, you realize that it's not even true. For example, this one that is my favorite, of white people always looking at Black people and calling them lazy, extremely lazy. And you wonder, how is it that these lazy people are the ones that are less in number on the welfare, on the EBTs, and all that? Yeah, food stamps. How come the very hardworking people are the ones that are actually the majority on the welfare with a whooping 76%? Doesn't make any sense unless they have anything to explain there. You wonder. And for example, the other thing that I keep talking about, the undocumented immigrants that were deported because, they left, and immediately white people are crying all over social media because they need those immigrants back because they are unable to do their jobs on the farms. How come a very hardworking crop of people are unable to do their work by themselves? Why do they need the illegal immigrants to come in? Why do they need the undocumented immigrants to come back to work for them? Because, if you're that hardworking, you should be able to do your work by yourself, and you do not have to rely on other people to do your jobs for you. So, guys, if you're watching me for the first time, my name is Furaha, and I hope that you're keeping safe. Kindly consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't already, and keep safe, guys. Please keep safe. I do understand that there's a lot that is happening in America currently, and people are just feeling a bit disillusional about things, and disillusioned, and it's just hard. It's just so hard economically, stuff. Yeah, but I want to tell you that everything is going to be fine. There's a lot of things that you people have gone through that are long gone, they're past. Yeah, these too shall pass. So guys, I'll see you on my next video. Bye for now.